wasn't very interesting going out frog hunting in Scotland. And then when I came to Australia, everything seemed to be fascinating here. And having not a massive memory, I started looking at moths and thought, I think I'll give up because there's 20,000 species of moths in Australia. And frogs, I thought, that's a bit easier. Anyone know how many? Have I got it there? I have. Yeah. Ah, wow! Amazing audience. Yeah, so frogs are a bit easier, 36 in Victoria. I thought, that's doable. And they're quirky and fun to chase, and you can get your welly boots on, as I call them. So 5,800 species worldwide, a lot less than the moths. 219 in Australia, 93% of which are endemic. So if you lose them here, you lose them from the planet. So another special thing about Australia. 36 in Victoria, and then getting easier again, 12 species. We can all do this. So of the 12 species, or of the 36, there's only one really in the North Central that's listed as nationally threatened, which is, anyone know what that is? Which one? Yes, growling grass frog. And there's a few others that are listed under other things, like local Victorian legislation, or internationally they list things now. So of all of them, there's about 29 listed as threatened. And in Victoria, that's 36% of ours are threatened. And we had a bit of, from the previous talks, you'll know why, changes in catchment and development of land and those kind of things. So I'm going to just focus on 12, just to make it easy. It's just there's a few little frogs on the outliers that make it a bit challenging, but 12 in the North Central, so we'll move on. So why survey frogs? I basically think it's fun. And I think it's a great way to engage children and any child within us, basically, to get into the environment. And again, it's a great way to get community, from everyone being Waterwatch, but it's a great way to get people involved, just to have something in your hand and see it and try and identify it with nets and jars. So that's just Australian Ecosystem Staff Development Day. Another really important reason to do it, this is Lindsay Island, which is up in the far northwest of Victoria, just before you pop into New South Wales. This is an example of when we were in the drought. Basically, a lot of CMAs were saying, oh, crikey, the environment's in such a mess. We have to give some environmental water to some of these ecosystems to help the species survive. And so this is Lindsay. This is a Scottish billabong up in Lindsay Island, just as an example of one of them. But they basically put water allocations into Hatta, Walpolla, some of the lakes along Shepparton, Black Swamp, Moody Swamp, if anyone knows any of those. And then they had to monitor what was the response. Was it worth all their community money putting water into these places? And so then they'd get people like us to go before and after and see did it work. And this is in the middle of a hardcore drought, and they put water into Scottish billabong, and it was spectacular. And I've never seen so many growling grass frogs, which is what that top right-hand side is, in my life. You were actually walking along, you couldn't count them, could you? They're just ping, 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 flying everywhere. So amazingly successful. Obviously, they did it at the right time of the year. They did it in spring, and it was obviously wet long enough for those tadpoles to get big enough, because growling grass frogs can take up to 15 months to grow from a tadpole to a frog. So the timing was right, the season was right, so it was really successful. So monitoring shows that. But it's further downstream at the Mullaroo flood runner. Obviously, it was too late for that part. The water quality was terrible. We didn't. Struggling trees, really poor quality habitat from drought and river regulation. So it's a really good source of seeing if your management works or to see how healthy ecosystems are. Why else is it important to look at frogs? Well, again, there's really good photographs of this amazing trip, was that they're food. So the bottom picture is a Devese banded snake, which is nationally vulnerable, just about this size. They weren't sure if it's poisonous or not. I don't think many people have been bitten by one. But that's got a spotted grass frog in its mouth, so obviously frogs are food for snakes and reptiles and mammals and everything, and birds. And then the top right hand in the same trip is a great egret, which is also nationally vulnerable, with a growling grass frog tadpole in its mouth. So really important food for the ecosystems. Some interesting frog facts. The top right hand, it's just I find Australia an amazing place. It just blows me away all the time. And this is a good example of it. The top right-hand frog is called does anyone know? Gastric brooding frog. So it's incredible. It's in southeast Queensland. where the frogs actually eat, the female frog eats the eggs, and she looks after them in her stomach. And by doing so, she has to stop producing hydrochloric acid. And then when they get bigger, it's like 20 of them. When they get bigger and bigger and start turning into little frogs, she has to collapse her lungs, completely breathes through her skin, doesn't eat. And then 20 days later or something, out they come, or sorry, 6 weeks later, out they pop out of her mouth. Incredible. The sad thing about those is, and Ray's going to talk about this afternoon, they were discovered in, there's 2 species. One was discovered in 1971, and one was discovered, the southern and the northern. The northern was discovered in 84 or something. And by something like 85 and 86, both of them were extinct. And one of the things they think is that maybe the scientists who discovered them maybe took a chytrid fungus there and potentially wiped them out. So you've got to be careful when you're monitoring that you don't go and actually wipe out what you're studying. But amazing frog all the same. Oh, and in that time as well, they actually developed a chemical drug for humans to stop stomach ulcers. So another reason for frogs, or any animal really, is that it's, if you only care about what it gives to us, is great medicinally. Corroboree frog, down the bottom right, stunning frog from the Highlands. Again, a wee bit at risk of fire and chytrid fungus, but stunning. Froggy facts. The green tree frog down the bottom, they produce a gland above their eyebrows. It's used to reduce blood pressure. So some quirky, interesting things there. And frog biology. So that top right-hand picture I've taken of the frog site on the internet, it's one species, but they all look different. One's stripy, one's spotty, one's plain, and it's a common froglet. And the basic advantage of not having the same look is predators can't get their eye in for you. If you always wore the same clothes, someone would attack you quite easily. Also, they're dull. They're out at night. No one has to have fancy outfits on in the evening for if it's pitch black. So the colour isn't as important. So again, some of the frogs, it's quite hard to tell, especially that common froglet from the top of them, what they are. Also, all this common sense, like, where do you find the frogs? Well, it's in wet patches because they actually breathe through their skin, so it's got to stay moist. So you're not going to often find it unless it's a damp spot under litter or in a waterway, or if you're in the desert, they're going to be dug in under the ground. So the skin is very delicate. It produces, again, amazing thing. Just, if you put anything in a wet environment, it'd be all mouldy in no time. So it's incredible. They've got this amazing skin function that produces antibacterial, antifungal chemicals from glands in the skin and anti-dehydration stuff as well in their blood. So incredible organs. The skin's actually an organ that they breathe through. It has to stay moist. So again, when you're handling them, you've always got to have wet hands because you don't want to be drying them out by holding on to them to protect that skin. That bottom picture, that's another adaptation to surviving and not drying out. It's called a water-holding frog, or Cyclorana. They're they're not in Victoria, but it's just a good picture to show you the skin. But they actually they have the whole crusty outside bag, only connected by their nostrils, little tubes to the outside, and they basically reduces dehydration by 7.5 times, and they produce a chemical as well to stop the dehydration, and they survive underground for years. So some of the techniques that Damien asked about, how do frogs survive like this? They could survive for 7 years or something underground without having a drink. And they also fill their bladder up and just reabsorb the water from their bladder. Okay, froggy defence. Even though they're boring a bit on top, flip them over, and some of them are spectacular. So that bottom right picture's the southern toadlet. Quite dull on the top, like our bibrons, but flip it over, it's amazingly orange and blue mottled tummy. And on the left, that's the frog from Woodend, Macedon, called the Rocky River tree frog, and really striking markings under its legs, and quite a lot of them have got that in their groin. Because when they're sitting, when they move and they flash, the predators focus on the coloured bits, and then they sit back down again and hide them, and they're sort of dazzled and can't find them. So, and also, it could also make them think that they're poisonous, because if you're bright orange, you generally would think that you're poisonous. So really good defence mechanisms. Another one is that right-hand side one. We haven't stunned it or anything. You just flip them over sometimes and they pretend they're dead, because that's another thing. A lot of animals only like live food. So by pretending you're dead, you might have a chance of surviving. Froggy love. So that top one is a brown tree frog. You probably know these ones. The males start to grow special pads for holding on to the females, and they just grab on and they don't let go until the time the female's ready or in the mood. And they just cling on. It's called amplexus. And then when she decides it's right, or if he's right for her, she lays the eggs and he puts sperm on them as they come out. And so they're fertilised sort of on the spot, and then he'll let go. The eggs, again, it's an amazing kind of natural process. For the eggs, the eggs have a jelly on them. That basically, if it swells up as soon as it contacts water. So again, they need water. And in that jelly, apparently, if you wash it off, the eggs won't fertilise. So another chemical that stops them from dehydrating and involved in the fertilisation process. And you can tell different species by the eggs. Well, more different genus by the eggs. So that frothy one, anyone know what froths up their eggs before they lay them? Or as they lay them? Yeah, who's that? Awesome. So it's marsh frogs or limnodonastes. The female, as she's laying them, she froths them up with her hands behind her legs like this to make them float. So if you see frothy floating things like that, it's a marsh frog. Other ones sink. Others are in the ground, like bibrons. So what I like to do before I go out is, what are you going to find? Because if you go out and you find something, it's quite frustrating to go, what is it? So I like to go and get a list or a picture of what we have so that we can have a go. And there's basically one website, which is that top one, frogs.org.au, which is basically a field guide to frogs of Victoria. I'd show you, but I can't. But you just click on North Central, and it just comes up with 12 species of picture, their call, their distribution, and really simple, not too much detail. So I'd basically go to that, print that off, go out, and anything you find, it's a fantastic guide. And the other one down the bottom is just another site, but not as good, but different information. So get a list of what you've got, or get your amazing North Central field guide with you. And even if you don't want to have that with you, the Wildlife of the Box Ironbark's got the same information in it. Another good website is, because some of the maps are really quite generic. So this is the museum website. So if you really got interested, and after going to the frogs.org site, and you want to know exactly where the records are, it's really good for giving you actual spots of really rare things. So the people with the outliers, or if you find something unusual and you looked on there, it'd be really good to hand that information in to let people know that it's a new record. Because there's not a lot of frog monitoring done until Cass is getting cranked up to do more, to find out where things are, so that it wouldn't surprise me if you become famous for a short time from some new discovery. All right, so off we go. We've got our field guide. We go down to the waterway or your dam, or if the water's scarce, you might have to look under things and do a bit of a search. But when's the best time to go? Basically, if frogs are calling, it's much, much easier to find them than standing there in the dark looking under things and damaging sort of microenvironments to do it. So the best time to go is actually when things are calling. So dark night, maybe moonless because they don't want predators to see them, moist so they're staying so they don't dehydrate, and obviously dark. But the calling time's critical. So if you wanted to see Bibron's toadlet, which is a really important local one that's endangered under the local legislation, the Victorian legislation, if you went out in any time between July to December, you won't hear them. The chances of finding one are so slim. You'd have to actually look around and dig up things and really be quite disruptive to try and find one. And you'd be really, really struggling, actually. Whereas if you went out during the blues, the breeding season, the reds calling and the yellows eggs, and again, it's probably not based on lots of information, but that's our best current knowledge, then you'll hear them. And then you try and find them once you hear them. So much easier to find things when they're calling. A lot of things call all year, but when you're looking for something specific like that, it's hard. You've got to do it at the right time of year. I'm going to promote doing it by calls, which is probably what Cass is going to get you to do too. But identifying the frog by the call is much easier, especially when they're really dull brown and they all look the same. They really usually sound very distinctively different. It's cheap, it's quick, it's accurate, and there's no impact on their environment. You do have to have patience, because when you go near them, they all shut up. So only the males call, and mostly when the conditions are right. So some frogs, I've got one note. Ignore the background ones. bonk. So, I mean, it's written up there, it's a bit of a clue, but do you all know that one? Pobble bonk. All right, and it's a low pitch. Other ones have got a higher pitch. So the spotted marsh frog in the bottom. It's like two rocks banging together. That's how I think of it. So a higher pitch, but a single note, repeated. Yeah, the tricky thing with that one, if you go south of the divide, it's only one click. It just goes click. Here, over the north of the divide, it does multiple clicks. So it goes click, 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 like little machine guns almost. Yeah, but when you go south, it's the same noise exactly, but single. And then other frogs that sort of numerous notes, like this one. Have you all heard that? That kind of whistling? Thunder in the background. So it's a brown tree frog. So you don't have to look at that to know what that is if you're standing outside. You know what I mean? Unless you just want to have a look at it. You just write down or send it to Kath or just take your own personal observations. It's a brown tree frog. All right. Tools that you need to do that would be, sometimes if you've got an iPhone, you can just tape them and you can have your frog calls on there from your free application from the Museum Victoria website. Or I have illegally. This is all not reproduced anymore, which is a shame. This is a copy of the calls of Victorian frogs. I'm happy to distribute all this illegally, of course, because we can't buy it anymore. And the same thing, but someone's burnt it onto a CD. So you can take your frog calls with you, have them in your iPod or old-fashioned tape recorder, so that you can go and check them against it. Or you can come back and check against the frogs.org.au and check what you've heard. Okay, so males only call when they expect a female. The females are often tuned into that frequency because it's often a riot of noise. You think, how can they hear who they want? And so they're tuned into a certain frequency so they can block them out. Pitch, frequency, and structure. And some things, if they've all got a similar pitch, then they'll almost separate themselves at a different time of day, so a different time of the 24-hour day. Yep, some species, the voice varies. I'm halfway through, I don't have time to do that. Oh my, all right. So if I can get all the males in the room to do a pobble bonk call, pretending that you're old, wise, and the ladies shut their eyes, let's have a go. So if all the males go bonk, with like you're old. Okay? All right, now do one like you're a young teenage boy. Okay. So the ladies in the room, which one's more attractive, the first one or the second one? The second one? So basically, the bigger the call, the deeper the call, the sexier it is to frogs too, because it means they've lived a long time, they're large, they've survived predation, they've bred, so it's a bit sexier than your wee bonk. So pitch and stuff matters as well. Speed and timing, sometimes you'll go out and you get common froglets going really fast, and other times if it's cold, they'll be like and they can sound like something else. So think about the weather when you're hearing things. On the warm-up call too for something sounds a bit odd when they're starting. You think, what is it? Okay. And this is just an example of the same, some species have exactly the same call. So with your Bibberns toadlet and the southern toadlet, they're all pseudophronies, these three, but they're all geographically separated, quite clever. So they didn't have to have a different call from each other because they're not going to have competition. They all sound the same, so it doesn't actually matter to us because they don't overlap. You're not really going to get, you're really only going to get the Bibberns here that's doing that. So it's quite clever that they didn't have to adapt their voice because they're geographically separated. All right. So if you hear that, that's an example of one you do have to go and look at it because you go, oh, I don't know which one could it be because it sounds the same as the other three, or the other two, so you actually have to physically go and look for them. So then you can justify being a bit disruptive by trying to see their tummy. This is a picture of Peter Robertson, is like the kind of guru of herpetology in Victoria. And this is his setup for that Lindsay Island project, where they've just, rather than anyone having to do anything, you just tape record it throughout the year. And just tape it at different years and you can tell what's in there. If you're nearly like 100%, I suppose, if it's out long enough. On that trip, though, a little parent's tree frog sat right on top of his microphone and deafened him for that one. It's pretty cute. Okay, so identifying frogs using so just to summarise, so if you get the calls off the website and you just go out and have a go, have your calls with you if you're keen, and then just go back and check what they are. It's a really fantastic way of doing it, and hands off. If you want to do it with your eyes, you can actually make sure what you see is what you're calling, especially if they're difficult to tell apart. And if you don't have the opportunity to go out at the perfect time of year, then you do have to look around for things. If the biberons aren't calling, you might be lucky to find one. So how do you do it? So you look along the sides of waterways. Having found the frog, find a frog. A good way to, without even touching it, is just to take a photograph. So most of our frogs we try not to handle. And you just take a photograph of it. Even if you want to flip it over, you can kind of use a bit of veg to flip it over and take its underside. If you do have to touch it, we always say wet hands. And if you're moving between a river catchment to another river catchment, and you're paranoid about spreading chytrid fungus, because it might not be in one, then you'd put a lot more control in, and we'll hear about that from Ray, about wearing gloves, if you do want to handle them too, you can put it straight into a Ziploc bag and with a bit of water in it, and you can see the belly and that without handling them too much. So if you did that, you'd use a different bag for every catchment. He'll tell you all about it. So take a photograph, view through a bag or a tub, a clean tub. And one thing I often say is, and someone else said that on a recent talk recently, I was trying to describe when you see a frog and you want to try and grab it and it's fast, you don't do that. You do this. And someone said, oh, a cupcake rather than pancake. And I thought, that's quite good. So yeah, you curve your hand and you try to grab it, and then you kind of curl your fingers up to get it in your hand. And also they tend to jump out your hand, so a good way to do it is to hold on to one of their legs. Sounds traumatic, but it's actually better than it jumping from your hand here, the equivalent of a 100-metre drop for us. So you can hear it, but you can't find it. So what do you do? Because frog calls, it sounds like they're coming from a spot, but they're actually throwing their voice a bit. So I need 2 volunteers. Right. So because they throw their voices, it's really hard to find them. So basically, 3 of you point to where you think it's coming from. So I'm pointing, even with your hand, so I'm pointing over there. And where they cross is where the frog is. So you get closer and closer, and you all move in. And you go, yep, it's coming from there, it stops perfectly. And you look under the rock, and there you go, it's a frog. So what are they? There's 3 tree frogs and 9 southern frogs. Just click on to the next one. So what do you look for once you've got it? So basically, has it got toe pads or not? Big fat toe pads on its toes? To the middle one, does it have like a big stripe down its eye? The right-hand side, does it have a black kind of spade on its foot? Does it have any glands? Like that one's got a big fat gland behind its ear. What shape's its eye? Its pupil, so that one's got a cross. What's its pants like? Has it got fancy pants? And what is its underbelly like when you flip it over? So all those things help. So is it a tree frog? It's a bit easier. Have they got big fat pads? There's only 3 in Victoria, in the North Central. So has it got a big fat pad, and does it have a big cross for a pupil? Easy, it's the only one that has those 2 things. And it's got a ridiculous call. Used to be called the maniacal cackling frog. So if it's got a cross pupil and a big toe pad, they're huge toe pads, it's a parent tree frog. And there's the distribution, and there's when they're calling. Well, I'd have thought they called more often than that, but and also they've got little green flecks on their back, they've got black and yellow mottling under their thighs. You don't even need that detail. If it's got a cross and it's got pads, it's a parent tree frog. Here's the one we heard earlier. So a little tree frog, it's quite plain brown, it's got toe pads, and it's got a dark stripe through its eye with a kind of white stripe along its lip. And it's not a very good photo for showing it, but it's got a dark stripe down its back from in between its eyes right down its spine. It doesn't have a cross pupil, so it's a plain tree frog as far as we're concerned in the North Central. And if you're lucky enough to see one of these, ridiculous call again. So it's really large. Look at the size of it, 5.5 to 10 centimetres. Very flamboyant in its dress code, bright green, golden flecks. It's got a really distinct eardrum. Can you see the eardrum? The other two didn't really have that. So if it's got a really distinct round eardrum, massive. Yep. The toe pads aren't massive. They're quite small, but it's a very, very distinctive frog. Ground grass frog, and you do get it in Bendigo. I think there's been records for Bendigo as well, Bendigo Creek. So if you see them, they're really noteworthy because they're nationally listed under the EPBC Act Environment. Newstead, have they? Wow, there you go. Really, if you do find them, you should record it through CAS and the North Central CMA because they're a pretty special frog, and Damien will tell you why about their habitat requirements. They used to be all over the place, but they've really shrunk down in the distribution. Okay, so there's 3 tree frogs. You've seen the perins, the plains, and the growling. A bit harder is the 9 from the southern palm. So there's 3 froglets, the bibrins, a spadefoot, and 4 marsh frogs. I better flick through these fast. So is it small or is it big? 4 in the North Central are tiny, less than 3 centimetres. So let's quickly go through them. Oh, and what's that one? Parents tree frog, well done. You can flick past it. Just a quick quiz. Okay, bibrins. Difficult one to actually find because it doesn't live in waterways. It actually lives in wet litter where water will come through it. So it could be like I was in. That's not it. It's the rat. Okay, so it's quite dull on the top, but it's the only one in the North Central that has that belly. So if you've got a little frog and you flick it over and it's got a black and white marble belly, it's basically a bibrin's toadlet. It's 2 to 3 centimetres. Sometimes it's got little orange caps on its warts. It's pretty dull looking on the top. What else? Pardon? Oh, and it crawls rather than jumps. So it's quite a funny looking little thing when it crawls. And it's one of the few ones as well that actually doesn't lay its eggs in water. It lays it in litter, and the male guards it. So when you see, during the breeding season, when you find one, you'll often see the man like this, with his eggs looking after them. You can see that they're quite boring colours, but that one's got nice red cap warts. And the fact that he's got eggs, you'll know that it's the bibrins, and it's black and white mottled belly. And it does sound a wee bit like a common froglet, but it's slower. It's just like a creaking door, you know. And they're everywhere around here. But again, in Victoria, they're threatened. So even though they're common here, they're not common other places. Another little frog, 2 to 3.5. This is one of my favourites because I love the call. Two different pitches. So Victorian smooth frog, basically it's covered in pink and orange. So again, if you find a little frog and it's got those orange flecks and black and white mottled belly, and it's small, it's the only thing it can be with pink patches. So it's called the Victorian smooth froglet. And the call is super distinctive, you can't get that. 2 different pitches, so you can't really get it mixed up. Again, that one's probably found more in litter and along the sides of waterways than actually in the water. So they just sort of lay their eggs, all the pseudophrenies and that, lay their eggs and hope that the rains will come wash it down and wash them into a little depression, not even a creek or anything, just a little puddly bit. So I was in Heathcote Forest yesterday, and I was sitting, it's completely dry, and I could hear one calling, and the rain had kind of washed some litter down, and it was about this thick, and I just pulled it apart, and there he was. And it's really dry around there. I don't know where the nearest creek was. So they just need a puddle. The most common frogs that you'll hear. There's that one. That's both of them, that's fine. So there's 2 crinius or common froglets calling there. One's going eek, that one. And the background's that you hear all the time. Have you all heard that? So the one is the common froglet, and the eek one is the plains froglet. Everyone will hear that in winter, and they're really hard to tell. This is one of the ones where they kind of camouflage. So they're really hard to physically tell from the top, but they're tiny. Some of them would fit on my thumbnail when they're little, or even small. They're ridiculously small, my pinky nail. And the only way to really tell them apart is to hear them. It's the guaranteed way to tell them apart. Or you flip them over, and the white one with the black mottled on it is the common, and the grey peppered ones is the plains. But you almost don't have to bother because you can hear them and go, oh yeah, that's common froglet calling. Very, very, very common species, fast at breeding up and quite abundant in our waterways. So 4 marsh frogs, that was the little frog, so you had the two froglets, Bibron's toadlet, and the smoothed toadlet, Victoriana. And so now we're going to go to the marsh frogs. They're a lot bigger, so they're bigger than 3 centimetres. So, do you all know what this is? You knew earlier. Yeah, so basically this is easy if it's kind of big and a bit chunky. And do you see on its back leg here, it's got a huge gland? Big gland in its thigh. That's got tibial gland, and that's the only one, apart from one that we'll talk about later. It's the main one around here that you're going to have. It's the only one that's not on the Murray floodplain that's got a big fat gland in the back of its leg. So it's called pobblebonk, and it's got a kind of gland along under its lip here as well. Kind of warty. It's got a bit of a mottled belly, but really, really distinctive. You'll see them everywhere, and they can get massive. You'll see them on the road when you're driving on a wet night. If you're like Damien, you're swerving to avoid them all. Swiss Army feet, so the pobblebonk and the burrowing frog have got a little spade on their foot for burrowing into the ground, because they're both ground diggers. And the pobblebonk is white. So if you ever got it mixed up with a spade foot, the spade foot is black. So it's got a white little shovel in its hands. And what's that one? Yeah, see, getting there. Okay, it's a young one. Okay. Tiny topaz, but you can see the topaz in that picture. Next. Okay, this is the one that looks like the cobblebonk. It often gets confused with it, but you only get it on the Murray, on the floodplains of the Murray, and you only get it, it burrows underground, and it only comes up after pouring down rain, so you have to be pretty enthusiastic to go looking for them. And it's called the great or giant bullfrog, or Limnodonastes interioris. So it's pretty uncommon. You'd have to be up on the floodplain, and that would be really worth telling people about, because hardly, I pinched that photo off the internet from frogs.org.au, because hardly anyone's got one. Peter Robertson sent me one too. The only difference, if you're physically looking at it, is they're quite a lot bigger. And they've got an orange tummy underneath with no mottling. So that's how you would mainly tell the difference between them. Listen to the call. That'd be dead sexy, I think, isn't it? Very deep. So you can't get that mixed up unless you're on the Murray floodplains with the pobblebonk. Okay. Oh, I love this one. Anyone know that one? Beautiful spots. Beautiful green. Oops. Just use it up and down, it's easier. The beautiful green spots, and they're really clearly outlined, and they've often got a big white stripe down their spine. They don't have toe pads, and that's the rocky one with the rocks. And I often imagine it's like painting white dots on a frog with rocks for some reason, so remember spotted marsh frog. Very, very common, one of the most common frogs in the box ironback. Okay. And one that you can get a wee bit mixed up with, but again, it's mainly on the Murray. It looks similar, but see how the blotches aren't really round? They're really all kind of messy, splotchy greens. And often, if you're lucky, they've got a really red spot behind their eyes, like this one. And it's got a different call, and that's called the barking marsh frog. But again, it's mainly on the Murray, along the kind of floodplainy bits along the side of the Murray, and it barks like a wee dog. Don't you click that? No, it didn't really sound like a bark in that one, but if there's lots of them, it sounds more barky. But they've got the red thing here, and the spots aren't as spotty. Okay, so then in last I think, common spadefoot. These are mainly in the Mallee region, because their spadefoots are designed for burrowing to try and stay wet, and they've got that really black tubercle on their feet. But they're a funny looking little, you can't really get them, they're really round, little blobby looking frog. And they've also, the only frog of all the ones in North Central that have got a vertical pupil. So they look kind of, sort of that goatee kind of eye on them. So a little fat frog with a vertical pupil that can only be a spadefoot. And if you're not sure, have a look at its leg, and it's got a little black tubercle. And they're mainly in the Mallee. They just come into the North Central, and then you can see by the diagram, and then spread up into the Mallee. And they're called, that's right. The call's like craw, 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 like that. I'll just do it instead. Move on to the next one. What's that one? The only thing with a mottled belly. Yeah, biberins. So I should say it's 2 or 3 centimetres. You found it in leaf litter, and it's got a black and white mottled belly. Okay. Now that's us finished. But the only tricky ones are those fringe dwellers, and there's only 3 people in the audience really. But if you're in Macedon or any of those places on the Werribee River or the Lerderderk Gorgie kind of river, you do get a rocky river frog that only lives in water that's kind of fast, not fast, but constantly flowing water. It's a really cool looking frog, or Litoria leisurai, but you'll only get it down in those 2 catchments. So unless you're down there, you can't really get it mixed up. And it's very different from the plains brown frog, because it's got a really big distinct eardrum, and it's got black splotches in its groin, and it's got a different call. I don't bother with the calls. And the other one, again, if you're at Rushworth or West, this is really tricky, is that, southeast, is the whistling tree frog, which is very, it's got a real whistling call, so it's a bit different. So you only have to worry about that one if you're in those specific areas. Yeah, sorry, what did I say? Oh, sorry, Wood End again. Indistinct, so it's not got that distinct tympanum, and it's got black blotches. So there's like a little key that'll help you with these tricky ones, but you mostly don't have to worry about them. And then in Rushworth's the plains brown tree frog, but again, only if you're way over there. They're supposed to not overlap, those two. They're very similar, but they're actually geographically separated, so you'd hardly ever really find it overlapping with us. Next. And if you're really lucky and you're just down in that Wood End area, you might get that one that I talked about earlier that looks like biberins, but it's got the orange tummy, and that's called the southern toadlet, but again, down only in the Wood End, Macedon kind of area. Again, worth reporting, because it's quite an uncommon frog as well. And lastly, this one's quite uncommon as well. You only get that maybe shepherding in lakes and swamps and maybe along the Murray, and it's another little toadlet, but it's got a different call. I just threw them in as just to be the fringe of North Central. Okay, so I really highly recommend frogs.org.au just to have a look, tell you everything you need to know. And if you get more into it, then you go to the museum website for those distribution maps that I've been using. Next. And legal matters. I'm a difficult person to talk to about this because I really believe people should be out living in the environment and seeing animals and touching them safely without not getting chytrid fungus distribution. However, technically we're not allowed to even go out and look at them or touch them or anything. So you're supposed to get a permit, and we do for a proper monitoring job. But to actually go out and look at them, and for you guys to be doing that, I think it's absolutely brilliant. But if you were doing a proper survey, for reporting to people, then you have to get a permit of the Department of Sustainability, especially if you're trapping them. I forgot to show you this. So another way that you can do it is if you're going off breeding season, is you catch the tadpoles. Because they might not be calling, they've already bred, and the tadpoles will tell you there's other species there. And that's Peter Robertson, who's one of the few people who can be bothered going to this detail, because it's quite challenging. And he basically puts a yabby net in the water with a little fluorescent glow tube in here, put one of them in there, leaves them out overnight, and then the next day he comes back and sees what tadpoles. Got no idea why they're attracted to fluorescent little bits of plastic, just maybe inquisitive. And then he separates them into different species in the buckets and identifies them with that book, which is, again, when these books come out, it transforms our knowledge, because it wasn't around until a few years ago. So he does tadpole searches, and he did that at that Walpola one. And a lot of it's to do with their lips. So you have to be into this to do it at the hand lens and sit there in the bush. So that's just a few examples of different luscious lips. Oh yeah, that's not, yeah, in case you trap other things. Damien, my safety officer here, saying if you ever did that, you have to make sure the net's sticking out of the water, or you drown things that get in there accidentally that need to breathe. So if the dissolved oxygen's low, they have to get up to breathe. Yeah. So that's if you're enthusiastic to do tadpole trapping, and you definitely need a permit because you're trapping an animal. Okay, what do you do with your data? I'm actually a bit confused about this, so hopefully Cass will enlighten us this afternoon, because it's a new system. But the more information the government get from us, the more they'll manage things, like where are biberins, how common are they, what should we be looking after. So you basically, hopefully, with the North Central, get this up, which Cass will talk about, tell the CMA where you found them, or you put them a little piece of paper into the Victorian Wildlife Atlas and they'll map where they are. And then you'd really contribute into a thing that I think is pretty great at the moment, is where are they, what's the distribution, how bad is the chytrid fungus, is it declining really common species, because it's quite rampant out in a Victorian environment as well. So it's very important to try to do that. And even just locally and telling your friends where things are and getting people interested. And basically there's a little thing there about how you can help, and I'm sure Damien will talk more about that shortly. How's my time? I'm done. So I hope you learned the 12 frogs, the three tree frogs, the 4 little tiny frogs, the spadefoot, and the 4 marsh frogs. So I hope that inspires you to get out searching. So thank you.